In 11 days, Donald Trump will give the first official State of the Union address of his second term. But if the polls are any indication, the American public's already told the president what they think about the state of our union. And it's a vision that's going to leave Donald Trump humiliated. According to multiple polls out this week, Americans are saying Joe Biden was a better leader than Donald Trump. The most humiliating of these polls for Donald Trump comes from his favorite polling group, Rasmussen, which is considered the most friendly to Republicans. Its polling director said, quote, if an election were held today between Trump and Biden, Biden would win. The polling comes 389 days after Donald Trump stood up in front of Joe Biden on Inauguration Day and said, quote, from this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end, end quote. Sit with that for a second. He was talking about a presidency that wasn't his when he used all those words. But ever since then, Donald Trump's done the opposite of what he said 389 days ago. We're less than 2 hours away from the third government shutdown of Donald Trump's second term. This one's a partial shutdown, but it's a big department, the Department of Homeland Security. Funding is set to expire at midnight as Democrats push back on Donald Trump's vicious, deadly immigration policies. And 2.5 months later from Trump's operation in Minnesota that saw 2 American citizens who were no threat to anyone at all, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, killed by federal agents, the Trump administration says it's pulling immigration agents out of Minnesota. The decision was no doubt hastened by what you're looking at in front of you. Everyday Americans taking to the streets in the bitter cold, coast to coast, and saying, damn it, we have had enough of this. We've had enough of this. Many locals, citizens, and officials in Minneapolis say they're waiting to see just how thorough this withdrawal actually is. The New York Times reports, quote, the Trump administration's pullback of federal immigration agents from Minneapolis was a political retreat that showed that there are limits to what Americans will accept as the president pursues his deportation agenda. The withdrawal came on the eve of a funding shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, with a drumbeat of polls showing public opposition to President Trump's immigration tactics that rose after the fatal shootings of 2 protesters by federal agents last month. As Republican lawmakers increasingly worry about their midterm prospects, a few began to offer critical statements on the issue. We now know that 2 ICE officers involved in a non-fatal shooting of a Venezuelan man in Minneapolis are now under investigation for lying. MS Now reports, quote, federal prosecutors are investigating whether 2 Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers lied under oath about the shooting of a migrant in Minneapolis last month, an ICE spokesperson said. The about-face on the case, which Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem initially called an attempted murder of federal law enforcement, marks the latest instance in which immigration authorities have had to walk back such claims in the face of evidence contradicting them. On Thursday, prosecutors moved to dismiss the case, and on Friday, Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin told MS Now that a joint review of video evidence by ICE and the Justice Department has revealed that sworn testimony provided by 2 separate officers appears to include untruthful statements regarding the shooting. Both officers are now on administrative leave. Today, my old friend and colleague Don Lemon entered a not guilty plea in federal court in Minnesota 2 weeks after he was charged with 2 crimes while covering a protest inside a church in the wake of these Minneapolis shootings by federal agents.
People are finally realizing what this administration is all about. The process is the punishment with them. And like all of you here in Minnesota, the great people of Minnesota, I will not be intimidated. I will not back down. I will fight these baseless charges, and I will not be silent.
While the Trump administration doesn't seem to have an appetite for any consequences from the new trove of Epstein files, some people are facing some real-world consequences. This woman, Goldman Sachs top lawyer Catherine Rumler, announced that she will resign after her emails with Jeffrey Epstein were made public. The talent agent, Casey Wasserman, has lost some of his most high-profile clients, including 2-time Olympic gold medalist soccer star Abby Wambach, over his relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. Yesterday, the former Prime Minister of Norway was charged with gross corruption for his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. There are a bunch of others. none of whom have been charged with crimes related to sexual abuse or sexual assault. But this accountability is not extended to members of Donald Trump's inner circle connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Today, the Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke at the Munich Security Conference, where she said this.
I think what we are seeking is a return to a rules-based order that eliminates the hypocrisies around when too often in the West we look the other way for inconvenient populations to act out these paradoxes, whether it is, kidnapping a foreign head of state, whether it is threatening our allies to colonize Greenland, whether it is looking the other way in a genocide. Hypocrisies are vulnerabilities, and they threaten democracies globally. And so I think many of us are here to say, we are here and we are ready for the next chapter.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Robert Reich, who served as Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. He's a professor of public policy at UC Berkeley and the co-founder of Inequality Media. Professor, good to see you. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good to see you, Emily.
Where to start? There's Munich, where the French have said it's time to be independent of the United States. There's America, where, as we see, the fallout from Epstein is not the same. There's an economy that is, if you look at the top, let's start with that, because you study this stuff. If you look at the top line numbers of the economy, they're okay. They're not bad. Unemployment's pretty low. We had pretty good job creation numbers. Inflation looks like we're getting it under control. But this economy is wildly unfair and unequal.
And it's getting worse. Remember, Donald Trump was elected in part because he said he'd bring prices down.
Yep.
And you had particularly young men in America voting for Donald Trump. They felt that they wanted somebody who was on their side economically and politically. Well, what did we just learn? A new poll of young men shows that most of them feel like they've got a bad deal economically under Donald Trump. Many Americans, in fact, the polls are showing most Americans feel that they were better off a year ago, before Donald Trump came to town. This is a major turnaround, Ali. This is something that portends for the Republicans a very bad midterm election if Donald Trump permits there to be midterm elections. I mean, this is the man who staged a coup against the United States in 2020. So I can't predict what he's going to do.
Well, he said the party in power always loses seats in the midterm election for no good reason. So why even have the midterm election, which is you can write off as Donald Trump nonsense, except there's the SAVE Act, which is not boilerplate Republican voter suppression. This is a whole new level of things. You and me equally could be asked to provide proof of citizenship to vote. This is not a pass, please country.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope and expect that this will be something that does not get through the Senate. You can't get 60 votes for this in the Senate. And therefore, Donald Trump is not going to be able to get this actually enacted. But it is an indication of the kind of lengths to which he and his Republican lapdogs are going to go to try to, if not stop the election, at least make sure that the Republicans stay in power. I don't think they're going to succeed, but it's something that we all have to worry about and harden our election processes.